Okay, so let's have a look at some traditional approaches. In this section, we're going to have a look at the grammar translation approach, the direct approach, and the reading approach. So the grammar translation approach to language learning dates back from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and the perception of a well-rounded education at the time included the study of classical languages, for example, Latin and ancient Greek, and their classical texts. The purpose of studying these languages was not necessarily to be able to use them for communication. Rather, it was believed that someone who could read classical texts in the text original languages would be well socialized or civilized, having strength of character and a broad understanding of life. Perceived additional benefits were the development of logical thinking and an improvement in the standard of the learner's first language use. The grammar translation approach methodology focused almost exclusively on written work, with very little, if any, development of oral skills. Testing was conducted through translation exercise. So learning activities included translating passages from first language to second language, and then from second language to first language, involving translating word by word with little attention to content or meaning in the process. Learning grammar rules, often long and elaborative explanations as well. Learning activities also included applying those grammar rules in translation exercises, analysing the grammatical structures in passages, completing written exercises, drilling verb conjugations, parsing, so identifying parts of speech of words in a sentence, memorizing lists of words often unrelated to passages, and comparing the grammar of the first language to the second language, and finally using text graded for level of difficulty. Although the grammar translation approach is generally seen as outdated, there's evidence of its positive influence on current language learning methods. Aspects that are worth incorporating into language learning programs include grammar and vocab need specific attention. In a skills-based program, accuracy can tend to be sacrificed for the sake of fluency development or communicative ability. The second is staged and graded introduction of concepts and language can assist acquisition as concepts or structures are built upon. Combined with a focus on real-life language needs and fluency practice, this is a helpful approach to learning language. Also, a focus on sentence structure is another aspect worth incorporating, as it is helpful as a foundation for producing language. Also, the use of the first language for grammatical explanations can be far more expedient at times than labouring on in the second language, where meaning is clouded by insufficient comprehension of the explanation. Translation is a valid use of language. The skill of interpreting will always be in demand. For example, in the professional settings such as the medical field, it is very much needed. And finally, a focus on accuracy gives learners the security of knowing what is right and wrong, and the opportunity to develop good language habits. So these are some of the aspects that are worth incorporating into our language programs from the traditional grammar approach. Moving on to the direct approach. So in the early 1990s, due to the change in the industrial climate, along with the increased international trade and travel, there was a much greater need for people who were able to communicate in foreign languages. The grammar translation approach was failing to produce this communicative competence. And so in a large pendulum swing, teachers began to experiment with techniques more closely resembling first language learning strategies. These new methods proved popular in Europe, where travel was convenient to places where the foreign languages were used, opening the opportunity to practice communicating. The direct approach is based on the belief that second language acquisition should follow the same process as first language acquisition. So therefore, all instruction should be in the second language, and the first language is never used in the classroom. And we can see this quite often actually in our language schools, even here in Australia. So where we have the English only policy. So as soon as they step into the school, English only. If you're caught speaking in your first language, you're out. Another aspect is speaking must be well developed before introducing reading and writing. Reading is introduced before writing, and grammar translation methods or techniques should be avoided as they draw on the first language skills. And finally, grammar should be acquired inductively through observation and analysis of the first language, not by learning the rules. The direct approach emphasizes meaning. So language is for communication, for conveying meaning. It also emphasizes oral skills, and these are valued and promoted. This stands in stark contrast to the previous views in which language learning was regarded as an intellectual exercise of translating written texts, having little, if anything, to do with spoken communication. It also emphasizes correct pronunciation, and this is valued because the aim is communication. It also emphasizes exclusive use of the second language from the earliest stages of learning. So children don't use another language in learning to speak, and the direct approach promotes that adults are better off without the interference of their first language. It also values dialogues, so listening to, repeating, and memorizing dialogues, as well as the use of pictures and relia to establish meaning and context. Influences of the direct approach can be seen in modern teaching. The direct approach is clearly the forerunner of the audiolingual method, which also relies heavily on repetition and memorization of dialogues. It was endorsed by Krashen, who promoted comprehensible input and positive effect as important factors in second language acquisition. It shares many common practices with the TPR, so second language used exclusively, listening before speaking, and before reading and writing. Many communicative speaking tasks share the same underlying principles as the direct method. Those are: complete the task using only your second language and focus on fluency rather than accuracy, with communication being the most important aim. The popularity of the direct approach waned due to difficulty in supplying teachers who were native speakers or had native-like proficiency, a necessary qualification for this approach. Finally, let's have a look at the reading approach. The Depression in the 1930s meant that overseas travel was not as common, and the need for speaking skills in foreign languages once again declined. There remained, however, a need for well-developed reading skills in some areas, for example, in academic and scientific studies. The frustration caused by the short supply of teachers who could facilitate learning through the direct method precipitated a pendulum swing back to the methods focusing on reading and writing. And the aims of the reading approach are to develop reading ability and to develop current and or historical knowledge of the country of the target language. The features of the reading approach include exclusive emphasis on reading comprehension. This differs from the grammar translation method by moving from a word-by-word approach to translation to using a whole text approach, using the context to guess meaning of new vocabulary. Lots of reading is done in and out of class. It also included vocabulary, seen as more important than grammar. Vocabulary is increased quickly, though sequenced according to difficulty. It also included graded input, so readers were developed and graded according to difficulty, and again, vocabulary is graded according to difficulty as well. It also included grammar, however, only that useful for reading comprehension is taught. Translation is appreciated as a helpful exercise, and the teacher doesn't need good oral proficiency.